Hi, I'm Jamie Poisson. In 2025, news of the biggest, most sensational sports scandals was broken not by ESPN, not by Sports Illustrated, but by a podcaster named Pablo Torre. On his show, Pablo Torre Finds Out. It was Pablo who investigated Kawhi Leonard's alleged multi-million-dollar under-the-table no-show deal, and it was Pablo who uncovered potential collusion involving NFL player salaries. Pablo is with me today to talk about the year in sports scandal, the state of sports journalism, and how gambling fits into all of this. Pablo, hey, thanks so much for coming on to Front Burner.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for paying attention to a strange but very energizing year for me. I'm still kind of reeling from all of it.
We have quite a few people on our team who are big fans of your work, so we're
Oh,
pleased to have you on.
thank you.
I'm sure some of our listeners are also big fans of your work and listeners of yours, but for those who aren't, this is kind of more like a general news podcast. Can you kind of give me the conceit of your show and tell me like the kind of programming that you're doing?
Yeah, I think of us as a news magazine at this point. We do 3 episodes a week, but the premise is that we use journalism to solve mysteries. And so, what does this mean? It means that we are going to take on billionaires, it turns out, often the richest people in sports, but also we're going to solve our own self imposed curiosities like which athlete has the best self branded weed strain. That was also an episode that we did very rigorously and
Um,
investigated just as rigorously, I dare say, as salary caps or convention.
my husband was talking about one you did where you found the Airbnb that Bill Belichick was staying in with
Yeah,
his like 29-year-old girlfriend.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
stayed at that Airbnb. I rented it. I employed an army of geoguessers, which is a whole other episode. Who are geoguessers? What are they? They're the people who can like take a snapshot of Google Maps and tell you, oh, that's there. And so, long story short, here in America, there's this guy named Bill Belichick, and he's the greatest football coach of all time. And he's also basically business partners and romantic partners with a woman who is now 24. Just to get the math right, 24 years old.
Sorry, I think I said 29, 24,
How
24.
dare you?
Yeah.
How dare you? And one of the viral videos that came out was a shirtless Bill Belichick
Yeah.
wandering like a bear on a porch past the Ring camera, and there was a Netflix roast in which Tom Brady himself made fun of Belichick for this.
Everybody asks me which ring is my favorite. I used to say the next one. But now that I'm retired, my favorite ring is the camera that caught Coach Belichick slinking out of that poor girl's house at 6 a.m. a few months ago.
It was all over the internet, and no one really, it turns out, knew the truth of what that was. And turns out that the truth was an Airbnb in a seaside town, Winthrop, Massachusetts, owned by a couple that was happy to have me there asking questions. And again, journalism as a way of getting to something that can be both serious and thoughtful, but also very stupid sometimes. And that's
Yeah.
kind of my view of sports in a nutshell.
Yeah, and we're gonna get to some of the more serious stuff a little bit later, though I am pleased that we got to do that one. I mean, it was impressive, those geolocating tools. Just I wanna go through some of your specific investigations. But before we do, just I wanna spend a tiny bit more time talking about the state of the industry kind of writ large, right? And one really interesting and illustrative example, I think, is what's happened to Sports Illustrated. And so I watched a video from former Sports Illustrated sports writer Jeff Pearlman, who talked about the moment that he realized that sports media was near death.
When I worked at Sports Illustrated, they used to have in their building in New York City the greatest sports library you'll ever see. Ever, ever, ever see. And it was this room, this enormous room, columns after columns filled with sports folders, alphabetical. So if you wanted articles about Mickey Mantle, there'd be like 5 different folders filled, and not just articles, notes, reporter notes. You might find a receipt for coffee that Mickey Mantle reporter had stapled to a piece of paper. And I was complimenting one of the higher ups at the magazine about the library. And he goes to me, yeah, we're probably going to sell it off pretty soon and break it up and destroy it.
It also, I think, had some of the best magazine writing, in history. Um, but one day the magazine decided to sell and essentially dismantle the archive.
This lack of interest in sports history, this destruction of sports history, this ripping apart of it all, exemplified to me, honest to God, the moment when I knew we were really in trouble, when we stopped valuing stuff like that.
You are also a former Sports Illustrated writer, and why do you think the people running that magazine would ever see something like that as a good idea?
Because they misunderstood what value is when it comes to media. So typically, when you think about a modern media organization, you think about, okay, we're going to talk about how to make things pop on social. We're going to pivot to video. We're going to compete for the short attention span theater of everything. And a long form vault, it was called the Vault, the SI.com Vault, which was the warehouse for everything. There's also a physical library at the office, by the way,
Mm,
which was like, again, just the sort of thing that you had at a magazine once upon a time, a physical library. But the online library, which was the repository you describe, um, that wasn't monetizable through the framework of young people don't want to watch or read long things anymore, and this is entirely text based, and it seems musty. And what I have always found to be most enthralling as just a consumer of things, as a reader of Sports Illustrated, and with the tradition of literary sports journalism that Sports Illustrated perfected, um, was that the best stories were deep and
mhm,
reported and narrative, as well as just undergirded by legitimate journalism. Like it was basically, you got writing that was worthy of any great piece of fiction, but the heart of it, I mean, truly the skeleton of it, the everything of it was true. That's the magic of a great magazine. And so when the zombified Sports Illustrated reemerged and it was just missing the greatest collection of that. I
mhm.
mean, I was offended as a former employee whose work could not be Googled anymore. But mostly I was mad because that still works in modern times. And it is something that people, I think, media executives have gotten very lazy about because it is seemingly antithetical to modern media principles. But I think about how I constructed my show. Um, and I'm not saying that I figured out the solution because I have not, but we do deep dives that are magazine inspired all of the time. And what we are able to do is self aggregate, which means that like you could do both. It's not A or B, it's a yes and story of like advertise the things, market the things that can be short bites, but also drive people towards this thing that I think the the viability of documentaries has proven.
Yeah.
Like it's a hard business, but people still want to click on them and watch them. And so there is a way to not let all of this just be disposed of because it seems hard to monetize. Like we all want an evergreen, I mean, this is we being media people. Everybody says they want an evergreen vault of IP, of intellectual
Mhm.
property. Sports Illustrated had a century of it, and it just got trashed effectively because they didn't realize that this thing, the oldest story in media, tell good stories, could still be found in what felt like an ancient sort of vault.
So, give me your best example for you from this year of what you put out that you think was deeply researched, good journalism, well told, and that people liked.
Yeah,
What would you choose?
it would be this Clippers thing. And the Clippers thing is the investigation we did into Kawhi Leonard and Steve Ballmer, who was one of the 10 richest people in the world. And it took 7 months and got 3,000 documents. And the question was on paper, right? This is a pretty nerdy story. I could tell it to you and you would not be interested in it. So it involves carbon credits, it involves salary cap circumvention, it involves a former tech CEO, it involves a lot of just arcane terms having to do with like climate change. But when you see it through the lens of what sports uniquely provide, which is, as I
Mhm.
put it, like the cheese you can melt on broccoli, you realize there's great drama here. And so what this really is, as you alluded to, it's a story of one of the most mysterious athletes in the world being paid, according to lost secret contracts, an extra $50 million in violation of the rules around fair play and integrity that frankly reflect upon Steve Ballmer in the way that his conduct at Microsoft reflected upon Steve Ballmer, which is to say,
Mhm.
how do you circumvent the rules? How do you use all of the money in the world effectively to get what you want? And in sports, uniquely, you can't just buy the thing you want the most. You need to compete for it and earn it because there are these rules governing it. It's funny, like Steve Ballmer, just to be blunt about this, the degree of public pressure he's received as a result of this scandal we've reported
Mhm.
is so much more mainstream than what tech CEOs typically have to answer to in their own businesses. But
Yeah,
because it's basketball and fans and there is the candy of sports, it's popular. And that
that's a
to
really
me
interesting point.
is an interesting pressure point.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. Just for people who might not be familiar, just explain to me a little bit more exactly what you found um, Balmer did here.
Yeah. So this company called Aspiration is a climate change oriented company. And their whole thing was we will plant trees in order to zero out your carbon footprint. And so what the Clippers did was that they got Aspiration as a sponsor. There was a $300 million deal. They were the founding sponsor of the Intuit Dome, which is the most expensive basketball arena ever built that Steve Ballmer constructed. But what they didn't want anyone to know was that, according to my reporting, seven sources, 3,000 plus documents, there was a secret deal which we got and we published a secret contract in which Kawhi Leonard was paid, in this case, $28 million to do effectively absolutely nothing. And the reason I found this out was because there was a bankruptcy filing. Spoiler alert, Aspiration, the climate change company, went broke. Its co founder has pled guilty to wire fraud. It's the story effectively of Steve Ballmer entrusting a company to deceive the NBA by funneling money, helping him funnel money to Kawhi Leonard, because there are rules governing how much money you can pay your players. And so he used this side sponsorship in which Kawhi Leonard did literally nothing to get him eight extra figures into his bank account. That was the deal. But what happened was Steve Ballmer, it seems, was defrauded by that same company. And so it's a yes and story. He tried to get away with something only to be burned by the people he entrusted in a real, like, actual real world outside of sports sense. And so it became a giant mess. And at the heart of it was this question of, like, what did Steve Ballmer know and when did he know it? And to answer that question, you need to understand what he tried to do with this company and Kawhi Leonard in the first place.
I know there's like an ongoing NBA investigation going on right now about all of this, and like, what do you think could come of it?
So yeah, I mean, the day after the first episode dropped, we've done 6 parts now. It's kind of like a true crime series for us, for better and
Yeah,
for worse at this point. The day after it dropped, Steve Ballmer went on ESPN and gave an interview in which he declaimed everything and said, "I was conned and I knew nothing about this."
How would I be able? Look, they conned me.
You're one of the richest men in
They
America.
conned me. I made an investment in these guys thinking it was on the up and up, and they conned me. At this stage, I have no ability to predict why they might have done anything they did, let alone the specific contract with Kawhi.
Over time, I would say, my reporting has picked various chunks of that apart, to the point that Wachtell Lipton, this high powered New York City law firm, was enlisted by the NBA to investigate Steve Ballmer for cap circumvention, which is, for those non NBA fans out there, the cardinal sin of basketball, which means that he tried to pay more than he was allowed to get the most valuable commodity, which is an athlete, a star player, onto his team, Kawhi Leonard. And so right now, we are waiting and watching for the results of their investigation. We're at the point where this very high powered law firm with way better rates than me in terms of billable hours, they are trying to basically retrace the 7 months of my reporting as fast as they can to figure out, do we have to punish Steve Ballmer. And so, yes, it is the NBA effectively investigating itself. And I'm in the position of not merely making sure that my reporting is done correctly and clearly for public view, but now I'm also um, covering that. I'm trying to make sure that when an NBA commissioner is empowering a law firm to investigate his boss, because owners in sports are bosses of the commissioner, that they do that in good faith. And so there's a bit of a meta story now too about the investigation being investigated.
Um, to state the obvious, many people listening will have been particularly interested in this story because it deals with Kawhi, who, of course, left our beloved Toronto Raptors to go to the LA Clippers.
Yes.
And just before we move on, like, has Kawhi or Ballmer kind of responded to you directly? This, podcaster who's really given them quite a hard time this year, probably, I would imagine.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I have never felt more kinship with Toronto in terms of having to think about this guy and his motives, Kawhi Leonard and his motives. Yeah, so Kawhi Leonard was finally asked questions about this in public at Clippers Media Day, and he basically referred to me as a conspiracist.
Oh, I mean, it's easy for me. I mean, I don't read headlines or do conspiracies, theories, or anything like that. So, it's about the season and what we got ahead of us right now. And yeah, tomorrow we'll start camp and see what we got.
Steve Ballmer has acknowledged the show in the interview he gave to ESPN.
In the court documents and in Pablo's podcast, they report it was 28 million.
Pablo's podcast, I don't know anything about the court documents on this. I haven't seen them and I don't know. I'm not trying to be, I don't know. I really don't know.
Adam Silver, the commissioner, has said in public that this investigation was started because of this podcast, which is just a strange sentence, right? Like, that's not typically how journalism had been done before.
As we are seeing in this investigation here, it began with Pablo and his podcast. This was not something that was on our radar to even be thinking about, and whether it should or shouldn't be. I mean, and when this concludes, we'll take a fresh look at our rules in terms of.
So they, to be very clear, deny it.
Do you have any reaction or statement regarding some of the things that have been alleged over the last month?
No. I mean, the NBA is going to do their job. None of us did no wrongdoing.
We, the Clippers, have abided by the salary cap circumvention rules because that's the right thing to do. And we have done that.
Yes. Yeah.
And I, to be clear, stand by my reporting, continue to add to the corpus of reporting that I think disproves their denials.
Another one of your scoops that I wanted to talk to you about this year involved the NFL's Players Union, right? A body that is supposed to represent the best interests of NFL players and alleges that they were actually working with the league to keep secret details, including that league executives had urged team owners to reduce guaranteed player pay. Can you walk me through this story and what made it so significant for you?
Yeah, so this also is a story about a document. And the document here is a 61-page PDF. It's an arbitration ruling that was mutually suppressed by the NFL and the NFLPA, the players union. And the reason that sentence is striking to me is because these are adversaries typically. The NFLPA is kind of the only check on the most ascendant, most profitable business in sports, and therefore mainstream American culture. The NFL rules everything in America, and the union is supposed to hold it in check. And so there was this secret arbitration ruling that was published but never released by either side. And the fact that the union never did was shocking, because what it contained was, at the very least, a partial victory for the union, in which it said that the billionaires in the NFL attempted to collude to suppress guaranteed wages for NFL players. And so in this document, you have discovery, right? Like, the greatest word to any investigative journalist is discovery. I mean, you get private text messages sent between NFL owners. You have general managers, executives now on the record how they really talk behind closed doors. And they are attempting to do in private what the union had alleged they were doing this whole time. But
Mm.
the union decided to suppress this, according to our reporting, because they wanted to do something that lots of unions are doing lately, which is be quote unquote pro business. Because the pie of money is growing so large in sports, there is now an instinct among various sports unions to just go along to get along with the league because you're going to get more by being cooperative as opposed to being adversarial. And so this is now a story about, frankly, labor negotiations and labor law and
Yeah.
what it means to be adversarial with your employer. And
Yeah.
so the union, as a result of all of this, and there were again a multi-part series aspects to this, um, the entire executive structure of the union had to resign. So the executive director, this guy named Lloyd Howell, who's his own rich character with a deep and sort of sordid past, had to resign. The chief strategy officer and the former president of the NFLPA, a guy named J.C. Treader, also had to resign. And so the
Hmm.
domino effects of like sunlight on this big thing that should have been celebrated and taken to Capitol Hill, just like grandstanded upon. Look at what they've done. They decided to hide it because they thought they could be effectively partners with the league instead of an antagonist of it. And that is something that um, I dare say is a naive strategy when it comes to a labor negotiation. As soon as the reporting came out that we did, they were basically cornered into suing the NFL, right? And so basically, the strategy was we're not going to do anything because we think it's a good strategy. And then we report this thing existed. And then they immediately were like, actually, new strategy, we're going to take this seriously now. And so the entire principle of like what were you doing and why were you doing it, um, it very clearly, and again, there's so much more here to summarize, but it redounded to this strategy of we can get rich if we keep our members in the dark.
Mm.
And they think, as lots of people think, I dare say, that like there's a bit of a great man theory of politics here. Um, we, as the people in charge, know what's best. Trust us. We'll deliver you to the promised land. And that did not happen.
You've also done some reporting on a series of gambling scandals that have hit the NBA that I wanted to ask you about. So earlier
Yeah.
this year, former All-Star player Terry Rozier and Hall of Fame player and then coach Chauncey Billups were both arrested as part of a federal indictment. Other current players like Malik Beasley have been subject to FBI investigation. Former Raptor Jonte Porter was arrested by the FBI last year for an alleged part in a gambling ring. And what is going on here, you think, with the NBA and gambling, and then kind of you could expand it too if you wanted to.
Yeah, I'll connect it to our conversation, right? So, a
Yeah.
big issue in sports has been where's the money coming from? And so, historically, it came from these giant media rights deals in which the leagues themselves signed billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar deals with places like ESPN, for instance. Um, as cable television has been disrupted and eroded to the state of managed decline now, the money's really coming from other places, and it mirrors where it's coming from in US politics. We're talking about crypto, we're talking about Silicon Valley, we're talking about the Middle East, and we're talking about
Mm.
gambling. So, gambling as this new fountain of money to drink from, um, on some level, is entirely legal, right? Like it's legal now, you can do it, great. The issue is that in the world of legalized gambling, there are these things called prop bets. So a prop bet is basically a thing that did not exist before, when it was just like your bookie on the corner taking bets about who's going to win or lose the game. Now there is a legal menu, many, many pages thick in the case of every single game, in which you can place micro bets. And so
Mhm.
what's been happening with Jonte Porter, as well as the alleged players that you just referenced, is that they have been doing the thing that is easiest to do, given that incentive, which is personally undermining their own performance and allowing people to profit off of that inside information, allegedly. Right?
Yes, allegedly. I was gonna say, yeah. Yeah.
So in that regard, what the NBA is grappling with is a set of incentives that are very easy to game, in which the public is in the dark again, but behind the scenes, people can make lots of money, and that's been,
Mhm.
in broad strokes, the story of these gambling scandals.
Gambling itself, it has always had some presence in the world of sport, right? But it does feel like it's gotten to the point where these two worlds have really synergized into one thing, as you've just explained, and also, outside of sports too, right? It's becoming so ubiquitous in our society. You can just bet on literally anything
Anything.
now, and financialize it, right? Um, but like, I guess the question is, for sports, is it too late, you think, to institute any kind of guardrails or changes here? Or like, can the toothpaste be put back into the tube?
So what can be put back into the tube is this broad knowledge that there are bets you can make that didn't exist before, but now you know about, in which you can ostensibly make it big. The odds have always been terrible, obviously, in reality, but the sales
Mhm.
pitch has never been more effective for, let's just be demographically accurate, for lots of dudes, especially, that are
Mhm.
living in the Western Hemisphere, right? Like, that's been revelatory and problematic as a matter of addiction and as a matter of just like financial risk and harm. And my concern, if I can zoom out now, is that sports is so valuable. It's kind of like the Sports Illustrated vault problem almost. Sports is so valuable for reasons that are ancient and well established. And what we run the risk of is misunderstanding why they're special. What do I mean by this? I mean that if you create a conflict of interest in which people are caring about games in opposition to the actual magic of them,
Mhm.
if you are creating a world in which the outcome of a game, in terms of you care about these teams doing well, as opposed to you care about these micro bets cashing in, um, if you endanger why we fell in love with sports in the first place, you actually risk poisoning the well of sports entirely. The
Yeah.
metaphor I often think about now is just fracking, to be environmental again. It's this thing of, there's money if we just drill even deeper into this thing. Because yes, there is money there. You can have people bet on all these other things that sports houses. But if you do, you might risk poisoning the water supply. You might
Yes.
risk endangering the actual value that sports created, which is premised, unfortunately, on integrity and fair play and a certain purity in which you believe credibly that people are there to win. And that has never
Yes.
been more at risk.
And if you think, like, if we start to see more cases of athletes allegedly, being involved in this gambling and possibly undermining their performance, if you think that that's happening, then you can't trust what you're seeing with your own eyes. That feels like an existential crisis to me, for sure. You know, like, we've been kind of talking through this whole conversation about how sports media has really turned away from deep reporting generally. I'm not saying there aren't some brighter lights
To be
in,
sure.
in some
Yes.
places. Yeah. And I mean, that is kind of also applicable, to the news industry writ large. I think you've mentioned it. You turn on CNN or Fox News or really any cable news programming, and you will likely find a lot of the stuff that you see on ESPN right now, people arguing and debating the news, right? Rather than the original reporting, like a format that is really kind of dependent more on like performance and virality, not necessarily the truth, right? And I just wonder, before we go, if you might want to ruminate on the deeper implications of all of this that you see. What does it signal about us as consumers of news and information?
Yeah, so I did these sports debate shows on television at ESPN, and when I watch cable news, of course, I see the mutant offspring of it. The toy department argued all the time, and that was fun. And then
Mm,
the serious political journalists and news people started doing it too, and it became disturbing, frankly, because it was substituting out that reporting that you referred to. To me, though, there's a selfish case to care about journalism. The selfish case is people are starving for it. And I think there is a crisis in trust when it comes to every institution, basically, in our Western civilization. But media, especially, has been bad at arguing for itself, arguing for the degree of difficulty that it takes to do this work, arguing in the right places, such that you access audiences that are foreclosed otherwise to even understanding what it is to be an adversarial investigative reporter.
Mhm.
But the bull market for it is that the same premise of why something goes viral is that it is eye catching and shocking and just like a thing you didn't know before, right? Um, that is still what investigative journalism churns out at its best, as reliably as anything else. I mean, we are living in a world, of course, of aggregation, in which anybody can take something else and frankly, plagiarism as much as aggregation. Um, and what I hope people realize is that if you protect the source material like it is a body of water, a reservoir we drink from, you don't need to do it just because you're being warned that uh, it's going to be bad for your health. It's going to make you sick.
Mhm.
Do it because you could sell it. I just think that the internet is ripe for old things to be sold to new audiences in new ways. And so, what I do, being whatever, like this weird podcaster journalist type, I didn't reinvent really anything. I'm just doing stuff that existed in other mediums for now, an audience that is unfamiliar with them. And I'm just presenting it to them in their language. And I think
Yeah.
that has made me very confident in what journalism is supposed to be. But it's no doubt, as you put it, that when you watch the news, watch politics, it seems like the other thing is happening, and that's also, yeah, it's a shame.
Pablo, that was great. That was really, I loved listening to your answer to that last question, especially. It was really fun to have you on. Thank you so much for this.
Anytime, anytime. Thanks for asking good questions.
All right, that's all for today. I'm Jamie Poisson. Thanks so much for listening. Talk to you tomorrow.